I'm the founder of HackPack, and it's basically a specialized social media platform for the media industry. And we try to use it as a way to help media professionals around the world, especially freelancers, collaborate with each other, but also with clients and resolving issues that there are within freelancing. And some of the main issues that we focus on within this freelance hacks are issues around professionalism, helping you grow and expand to be able to get more clients, entrepreneurship, so that way you can get more clients, sell yourself better, and ultimately as well, safety, which this talk is mostly about safety, so that way when you are working, you're around tomorrow to also do something in the future. And that's kind of the concept that we have with these specific freelance hacks. And essentially we're doing them, one sec. Essentially we're doing, hi David, we're doing these freelance hacks basically once every 2 weeks, and they change topics, and we try to get 2 members, either already members of HackPack or people outside who are extremely experienced and amazing, such as Juan and Anya. And basically we have a conversation going over this, and I lead moderate. We'll go ahead and videotape and record this conversation as well, so that way people outside of our time zones are able to listen to it and participate if they happen to be working or something else comes up. And then we'll have a Medium blog on each specific conversation as well, so that way if you don't have time to sit around for an hour-long conversation, you get the quick top 10 from that in a few minutes. And that's more or less what these are. So I would like us to generally start off. I'll go ahead and recording it now. And Anya, can you start off and give a general description of yourself, a short background on what you've done around protests, so that everyone has a general idea?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me again. So yeah, I'm a journalist and media producer from Moscow, Russia. I work in journalism since 2013, probably, but I witnessed all the protests in Moscow since, I believe, 2010. And yeah, I was always very passionate about it, and I participated in protests while I wasn't working as a journalist. So for last 7 years, I have worked for several media outlets, Russian companies. So my first one was TV channel Rain, or Dozhd in Russian. It is the only one independent TV station based in Moscow. And after that, I was working for Novaya Gazeta. It's the independent newspaper for several years, where I covered many protests from 2017 2018 as a video producer. So we made a lot of videos for our digital branch. I was in charge of the YouTube channel, so that's why I was a producer for that content. And after that, I basically went to my gap year. So I was in Moscow for like last 1.5 years, but I was really into looking what is happening in Moscow, in Russia now, and it all was very, very interesting, and I can share all the experience I had with you guys today.
And Juan, can you give a quick background of yourself? We'll go more into your experience with protests in the questions, but give us a better understanding of you, your background, and how you associate with protests.
Yes, of course. My name is Juan Cortes. I'm a freelancer videographer. I work mainly for Jazeera English, and I do documentary. I covered protests here in Colombia for at least 8 years. So I'm glad to be here and share with you some experience and tips.
Wonderful. So to start this off, first off, Orte, if you have questions, write them in the chat, and we'll get to them as we're going along. Juan has to leave in about 30 minutes. We'll make sure we give at least 5 minutes before he leaves for any questions specifically for him. But we'll get moving along, so that way if there's anything comes up, you can ask it. So can you two basically share basically what are the types of protests in your country and region? Can you talk about the most recent protests that you've been a part of, and generally, like, how are protests there? Like, in the format, what kind of formats are they? Level of violence, police intervention, so that way people generally understand what the situation is in Colombia and in Russia, or Eastern Europe and Latin America. Juan, do you want to start?
Okay, yes. Well, here in Colombia, we have a special situation because we are the last 35 years in a armed conflict with one of the biggest guerrilla armies in the continent, the FARC rebels. And they signed a peace deal with the government 3 years ago. But we still have 5 illegal groups armed. So we are in a permanent and dangerous conflict. And this situation put some politics that you could see in the protests. I want to say that the narrative of the internal enemy is still active. So when you are in a protest in a street or in a big city, you can see violent demonstrators and violent response for the authorities, because still here are idea of this enemy, and you have to stop them, and the violence is quite frequently here. So this is the situation here, and here we have a lot of rural areas with indigenous people, for example, and peasants and coca growers. So there are different kinds of manifestation, demonstrations, and protests. So yes, it's different to cover in a city, and it's different to cover in a rural area.
Great, very good. So it's very interesting how the general civil unrest, violence plays such a large role through the militarization of the country. Anya, can you talk a little bit about the situation you've seen in Russia, as well as some of the surrounding areas, and the development of the protest movements there, and how it affects journalists in covering them?
Yeah, sure. So when we're talking about protests in Russia, it's really important to recognize what have happened in the 2012. So after the Prime Minister and after that President Putin decided to become a president third time, which was kind of a big deal for liberal parties and like people who were liberal in their hearts. There was a mass protest, one of the biggest ones in the last 10 years, that we call Bolotnaya Square case, when really big amount of people came to protest, and it was a violent protest. After that, more than 30 people were arrested and actually accused in police violence, being violent to police officers, and they were kept under arrest. There were several under house arrests, and many people were accused to up to 5 years of imprisonment. So after that, not many people wanted to protest, of course, because you never know like where you will be the next day after you being a part of a protest. After that, there was no like mass protests in Russia, but there were several that were big, and I covered them. So in 2016, 2018, there were some of the protests. I covered some marches that we can count as a protest. So after politician Boris Nemtsov were killed in 2015, 50,000 people came to the streets and marched in the city. So I have covered this one. After that,
you mentioned there was a big change in the age groups of people who were in the demonstrations.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Actually, I can just send a link into the chat,
Sure.
and Justin, if you want, you can share the screen,
Sure.
if that's okay. So in 2017, there were some investigations published on YouTube about members of government, about prime minister, and many young people. I mean, like really young, from 12 years old, decided to protest. So they came to the streets, and police officers were violent to them too. So I witnessed some of the children were carried away by the police officers.
And you said they're like about 12 years old, kind of what you saw, like 12, 13-year-old kids at that time?
Yeah, exactly. It was them. So you can watch on the link I've sent. Since 2018, many things have changed in Russia, and one of them is that any gathering of people could be seen as a protest by authorities, and basically in order to have a protest, you need to register your event in mayor's office, and of course it is
never permitted.
Because no use, right? So what is happening now is people go into like pickets. They just stand in the street with a poster, and this is probably the only way to show your discontent for now in Russia.
So it's very interesting to see how in Colombia the military situation with the FARC has left its imprint, even though there's supposedly a peace treaty, and then the bureaucracy in Russia creates its own way of diminishing protests. So I guess for you guys then as journalists, and for everyone else to learn, like what's your process to prepare yourselves to understand what you're going to be getting yourself into with the protests, of like how prepared you should be and what to do to prepare yourself. Juan, you were talking to me about a lot of really good ways you do research in order to identify what level of threat, what type of things to bring, what can you do. So can you describe to us the process that you have of that pre-editorial process to understand how to prepare for a protest?
Yes, well, you have to make a plan before you go to a protest. And a good plan always needs a little of research. So the editorial research, it's important. You need to read about the context. You need to watch the other colleagues are doing of this situation. You need to know your rights, for example. It's important because in every country it's different, the legislation, and it's important if you are in Colombia, if you are in Venezuela, if you are in Russia, you need to know what are your rights, and this could help you to understand what are the limits that you have. Other thing important is try to think in the location. See maps or Google Maps or images in order to make a mental image of the situation. For example, sometimes you have time to do it, sometimes you don't have time, but if you have the time, please do it. And please research about the actors involved. It's different if you are covering a protest of 12 years old and if you are covering a protest of coca growers in El Catatumbo or something like that. So it's important that you spend some time trying to find the profile of the actors, of the demonstrators. And it's very important to speak with colleagues because their experience could be really interesting and could give you keys for your personal safety. And it's important to prepare a contact person. This person, preferably outside of the protest, and this person preferably not a kind, because sometimes this person need to receive information that could freeze them if you are injured, or if you are in jail, of etc. So this person needs to be a person who could respond in a better way to solve the situation. And one important thing is you have to ask yourself about your capabilities and how do I feel about this story. Because sometimes you are too much involved. For example, if you are a woman covering gender violence, or if you are a black photographer covering Minnesota or etc., sometimes it's preferred to not do it. Just say no. I prefer protest. I'm not a journalist today. So ask yourself, I'm prepared, and how do I feel about this story? I think with these bullet points, you can prepare a plan and start thinking in the equipment, for example.
And so, like you mentioned to me, one of the important things to really consider as well is specifically what type of clothing to wear while you're out there, based upon the actors. Can you comment a little bit about that as well, like to that kind of detail?
Yeah. For example, sometimes if you are covering an Antifa demonstration, it's not a good idea to wear black clothes, for example. Because for the authorities, you are one of them. So try to look as neutral as possible and try to look as a journalist. I don't know what is this, but you need to try to look like a journalist.
And so what kind of stuff do you wear to try and demonstrate more you're a journalist? Is there any specific, like, do you wear a vest? Do you wear an arm patch? How do you make a decision of what to wear? And do you change it based upon each protest? In the sense, sometimes you want to look like a journalist, sometimes you don't?
Yes, absolutely. Sometimes you need to work with a low profile in a protest because both parts can hurt you. And sometimes it's better to be clearly identified. I, for example, use these patches with the Velcro, so you can put in your clothes, and sometimes I'm friends, and now I'm not. So this depends, and you have to look at the actors of the protest. And for example, here in Colombia, a lot of journalists use the North Face jackets. That are great, but the material could be dangerous because it's very flammable. So in a situation with Molotovs or some kind of gasoline, it's not a good idea to use plastic near to your body. So this is for some examples. You need to be hydrated all the time.
Be what?
Hydrated.
Okay.
You have to
be very aware of what's going on.
Yes, you have to take snacks and water always, because you don't know how many time you could spend in a manifestation. That is another big question. Sometimes you know how they start, but you don't know how could end. So it's a good idea to have some snacks in your backpack and water, of course.
And then how do you you're talking as well about, with the plan, identifying how much time you need to be up in the front of a protest or directly in the center. Can you talk a bit about that, and then how it defines what equipment to wear and what to decide what you wear?
Yes, it's important to keep in mind that if you are in movement, you are more safe than if you are staying or freeze. So the crowds are like rivers, and you need to stay in the borders, not in the middle. But you can go to the middle, take your shots, make a short interview, and then go to the borders again. Because the things could change very quickly. And if you are in the middle, you could receive the stones of the protesters and the pepper spray or other weapon of the authorities. So the middle is not a good place to stay safe. So if you need to be near to the action, go, do your job quickly, and get out.
And you told me as well as before that you need to have this all organized and decided in advance. So in that way, if things change, you're able to stick to your plan and then not allow yourself to get caught up in the protests and something happens that you didn't want to, right?
Yes, you need a plan, but you need to be flexible. Right. Because things change and the plan change. So you have to make a situational awareness all the time. And for example, try to look at the corners, try to look some buildings for reference. And in a moment of chaos, this reference could help you to find an escape. Because when you are in the middle of a clash with tear gas and sound grenades, and you easily could be deoriented. So these points, these buildings could help you to find a way to get out.
Wonderful.
And remember, the first thing is your safety. The second thing is the story.
Anya, can you share with us now a bit about your preparation, things that you do in advance to keep yourself safe, know what to bring, etc.?
Yeah, sure. I just would like to state it was great outputs from Juan about the plan and about the process being like a river. I totally agree with that. And I also thought actually now about being really psychologically prepared to go to protest, because you could witness many things that you wouldn't in your usual life. And it's important, of course, to be a medium between your viewer, your audience, and the event, but like think about yourself first, right? Well, so I would highlight two things. The research stage. So, well, you know about the protest. You know it will happen. For example, tomorrow it will start at 3 p.m. in this square. Well, now you need to go to the square and like see it yourself, feel the ground with your feet, because you need to know all the details of the landscape, right? That's like the first thing.
And what
Also,
particular things should you look out?
Yeah.
What particular things should you look for when you're trying to understand the landscape?
So if it's the square, you need to look for the higher places, like the steps, or just like where the landscape will be best for shooting the stuff. Also, very useful to see what like restaurants and like coffee places is nearby, because you would probably need to use it if you want a like 5-hour protest. Well, you also would want to see where the police cars are parked, because they usually prepare in advance, and it means that you can see like these police borders, like physical metal things, how they
barriers.
Barriers. Yeah, thanks. And if you are going to the place in advance, you can kind of have an idea how they will orchestrate the events. Well, other things I would suggest
what
is
documents should you gather in advance specifically for Russia? Is there anything specific? Because Juan mentioned basically having the ability to put a press Velcro name on your shirt and be able to take it off. What do you specifically organize in advance to ensure that you are either designated as press or you can hide out as a normal person? Which is better?
I'd say, of course, you need to state that you are a journalist, and so for us, it's a really ethical thing. If you are going as a usual citizen, you shouldn't have your press card in hand. Well, of course, you can have it, but you shouldn't use it. And if you are a journalist, I believe that you don't have a right to participate as a protester. Well, if you are going as a journalist in the protest, I suggest you have your documents. So it's press card. I found like 2 of mine. Like looks like this, this, and another one. And also, it's very useful to have a special document from your editorial or the company that hired you that states that exactly this person with this passport number are covering these events that having place on like this time in this square, because this is what really will help you if the police catch you as a demonstrator. Probably press card wouldn't help you, because they will they sometimes could not recognize it as a press thing. I can say that we usually wear patches, but it's a good idea from Juan. I believe I will use it. But sometimes we use special vests. We can create ourselves, of course. So like just have a yellow vest and draw the press on it. But the better way is to have these special vests from the police. Usually they give it to some accredited and like official press companies. So in Novaya Gazeta we had some, and that was very useful because they are blue and they have like a huge sign press on the back and on the front also. So I was usually wearing this one, and it really helped.
Juan?
I want to jump.
I was going to say, you need to get going soon. Is there anything, so has a live feed that he's going to be doing soon. Do you have any last comments you want to talk about and share or suggestions?
Yes, I have, for example, this badge, and I use in the neck, but be careful, because when you put this in your neck, you could be strangulated by accident or not by an accident. So if you use this, use a quick release, and you are safe. This is about
totally, yeah.
Badge.
Yeah, very good. Do you want to talk a little bit more about the benefit, like you were saying, of organizing your crew to look after each other,
Yes.
as well as the benefits of coordinating with? I'll have Anya talk a little bit later about having a security person to look after you. But if you don't have that ability and you're doing freelance somewhere, tell us what you would do with other freelancers in order to ensure everyone's safe or safer.
Well, the best situation that I recommend is work with a colleague or a buddy or other person. Because when you stay alone in a protest, nobody could help you. So, try to talk with your colleagues. For example, if you are alone and you are at the beginning of the protest, talk with your colleagues and make a deal, a plan. So I watch you, you watch me. When you enter, I'm here seeing you, and later I am going in and you see me. These little details could help to improve your security in a protest. Try never ever stay alone. When you are in a protest, there are at least another journalist. So talk to your colleague and make a plan. Do you have a car? Where is your car? Look, this is the police. We can go in case of emergency by for this street and things like that. Because in the moment when you heard a bang and all the people start to run, you don't have time to think nothing. You have to act based on an impulse, and if you prepare something, your instinct help you to resolve the situation. It's not time to think. It's time to act.
Can you comment really quickly before you go as well about, especially in Colombia, the difference in the preparation difference for rural protests and demonstrations versus city ones, and why it's so dangerous in rural ones?
Yes, when you are in a rural areas, you don't have, for example, medical facilities near to you. So you're more exposed to death if you are injured. And the weapons used by the forces are different, because in the streets you have the SMAT, the anti-riot special forces, that use non-lethal weapons like tear gas,
rubber bullets,
pepper gas, etc. But in the rural areas, you don't have SMAT, anti-riot police. You have militaries, and militaries have guns, large ones, and they are not prepared to dissolve a manifestation. They are prepared to combat an enemy. So it's very dangerous, and the recommendations are you need to stay away from the line between the two sides and try to use zoom lenses if you're a photographer or a videographer. And in these cases, try to present yourself as a journalist to the commander of the operation and to the protesters, demonstrators. So it could help, but yes, in cities is different because you have these non-lethal weapons that can hurt you a lot, but it's different.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, in the rural areas, you need to have a botiquín or medical first aid kit more complete than if you are here in the streets. If I'm here in the streets, I only carry a tourniquet and some gasa to put on the injuries, but no more. But in the rural areas, you need to think more about how to stay alive.
Very interesting. Is there any other last thing? I know you need to go right now, so anything else you want to say before you head out?
Well, I think that I use a lot is the OODA, observation, orient, decide, act.
Mm-hmm.
These 4 things could help you
Can you
a
give us
lot.
an example real quick of how you've used that before?
Yes, observation is the situational awareness. Pay attention of your surroundings. Look the changes. If you see the police officers are closer or are using his helmets with his face protectors, it's different than they are dispersed in an area, etc. So watch all the time and look at the change and minimal changes. The same with the protester side. Maybe they are talking, maybe they are preparing some that you can see what's happened. Stay alert. Then orient. This is the point that we talk about. Recognize the streets. Look at the buildings. Where is my escape route? Later, decide. It's time to go. Run and run with decision. No, run, stop, now. Run. And when I decide, I act. Run. Or stay. But this thing you have to do it all the time because the situation is changing at every moment.
Wonderful. Thanks. If anyone has any real quick questions, only one question, and then we're going to let Juan go. He has the live he's doing. Otherwise, we'll continue with Anya and go more into...
The last thing that I want to say is that the most ethical and professional journalism that you can do is the best way to protect yourself. So treat people like with humanity, look at her eyes and don't confront her because the people are angry, both sides. This could help you a lot. Do ethical professional journalism and be careful of your colleagues.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you, Juan. It's really, really very beneficial. Appreciate it. So,
thank you. I have to go.
Thank you so much. Good luck with your live, and we'll share the video afterwards and with everyone as well. So, appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. Bye.
Great. So, Anya, then continuing on with Russia, I guess. Let's go back to preparation as well before getting into being there on the ground. Is there anything else that you do, and specifically for you, in Russia to prepare of having that buddy system or people looking out to you? I think you were talking before about either always having eyes on someone, or what do you do?
Yeah, sure. So my experience of covering protests was as a video producer and video journalist. So I usually went to the protests with my partner, my cameraman, and I was the person who was looking out for somebody who is shooting the footage. At the same time, I was able to take pictures with my phone and be in touch with my office and help my newsroom with gathering some news, like where the protest is going and is there any things I would love to share with my audience on the website. But yeah, in this case, I totally agree with Juan on being not alone at the protest. Because in this case, if you are alone, probably will be like a couple of hours if you are taken by the police, and people will know where are you. So when my cameraman is doing a job and shooting the footage, I usually stay nearby, but not in the clash, in the mess, and I'm just trying to look out for what's happening, where this river, as Juan said, is going, and warning camera person where we need to go now. If they are shooting something and I see from another side of the event that something is important happening, like some politician is being taken, or young people is being taken by the police, I would usually say go there, come there, and we will have the best footage. Because if you're alone, you will not see what is happening out of your sight.
And in your opinion, then, when is the right moment to? So obviously, yes, you need to get as close as you can for those few moments to the action to get the right shot. But when's the moment to tell your camera operator to get farther away and move away from that? Can you give us some suggestions on that?
Yeah. So usually you see how it's going. So if you are staying close, you see when the law enforcement is coming, and you want to have couple, maybe from 2 to 5 minutes in that place, in place of violence, and then you need to go to some other place because you already have this footage, and now you need to stay safe. So Juan said brilliantly that you need to be outside of the circle, right? You need to dump in the circle, shoot what you can, and go back. Because actually they need you to come to your editorial after that and to download the video or to write an article. So your work is in progress, right? And it will be finished afterwards. So you need to think about that.
And then what, I guess, tech tools or technology suggestions do you have that you could prepare in advance to protest? And then what should you, and why? Why? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So, the most easy thing is to have your charger, right? To have your charger and 1 or 2 batteries for your phone, because the protest will be happening for 2, 3, 4 hours. Your battery will die. So it's stupid, but still don't forget it. Also, in Moscow, in the protests in 2018-19, for example, internet was kind of shaky because everybody is calling, everybody is tweeting, and one of the suggestions I'd say that download anything that you need in advance, download the map, and probably if you know that it will be a brutal protest and maybe internet will be shut down, because it's happening sometimes, you could prepare and download apps like FireChat, for example, that works in the local network. So it was used in 2012 protests in Russia, I believe, and I'm sure it will be used more widely now, because internet shutdowns is the case for all over the world.
Great. Yeah.
So yeah, probably that.
And I think we've also seen, like in Belarus, that was one of the big issues as well, was the internet itself went down, either because of government activity or just simply it was overloaded. One way or the other, you must be prepared.
Unfortunately, it was the government activities.
Yeah. So yeah, basically be prepared for not having access to what you need, and like you said, having someone on the ground, so you have that real physical person who can look after you and assist when you can't call someone because you don't have service.
Yeah, exactly.
So what are the techniques, so when you're on the ground during a protest, kind of like places during the protest to get to that are safe? Like Juan said, get to the outside, away from the center. Is there anywhere else that you would suggest to look for?
I would say that, I don't know, is it the case for all the places, but in Russia, I'd say that do not try to interact with the police, because the worst case scenario, you will be taken by them and you will spend some time in the police car, but they will not give you any interview. Like, don't dream about it. It would be great, of course, but don't waste your time, and yeah, just avoid them if you can. About the techniques, I mean, for video shooting, try to film people, like try to interview people, ask them why they came here. Don't forget to ask their names and affiliations if they have some, because you will not remember them if they said it's not on your camera, not on your microphone. Well, yeah, I think that's all. So probably in places like Colombia, it's more violent than in Russia, of course, but even in our regions, the violence not only on the streets, the worst things could happen after. Like one of the cases when it was one of my former colleagues from Medusa, the Russian media outlet. He was covering the protests in Minsk, in Belarus, and nobody can find him for like 2 days, and people pretty much sure that he was taken by the law enforcement, and he's not given any help. So this is the worst case scenario, and it also could happen.
And what kind of, if let's say something happens to either you or a colleague and you're taken, like, is there what kind of recourse is there to either help find someone or bring it to light or pressure political groups to let it be known where this person is and search? Do you have any idea of any organizations or any activities, or just social media promotion, or what?
Yeah, I think all of these things could happen. Like, first thing that you do is that you're trying to find some people who have seen him or her. Like the usual journalists, we know each other by face, so probably you call everybody you know and like ask, have you seen him? Have you seen her? And this is what really can help. Also, after some time, you probably find some footage of where was the last place.
Yeah.
Sorry, somebody street racing on my street.
Okay.
That's weird. Yeah, so you will find some videos when our colleague or somebody was taken, and it could help to understand what has happened. So the last video we found, not we, but my colleagues, we found with this journalist who was taken in Minsk, was when he was taken by law enforcement, and he was screaming, "I'm a journalist." And somebody was answering, "Yes, of course, take him." So this is what we can find something. I attached the link to the story in English if you guys would like to know what is happening.
And then what about any legal or NGOs that can be approached specifically in like Eastern Europe? Do you know of any organizations that can be approached to help out with the process? I mean, obviously it's in Minsk, so Belarus is a different government, different organizations, different NGOs. But do you know of any general ones that you would normally think of or you are currently trying to reach out to in this case?
Well, any independent journalist in Moscow, probably in St. Petersburg or in other cities, will have a telephone number of legal help. And some of us, we just have the name of the person who will help us in the case. Like I have this person's number in my phone, and usually it's good to have it like written, not in your phone because it could be taken. So like just written on a piece of paper in your passport. So if you will be in the police station and they will give you a chance to call, you will have this number because we all are going with our smartphones, but they are not our brain extensions. So if it will be taken from you, like what will you do? But yeah, there's many NGOs who's helping journalists also. I could provide some names if you want, but I mean, like it really depends on the region.
Okay. And then what else was I want to ask you specifically? There's one question I had. So I guess besides that is also like organizing things with your actual newsroom. So you've set everything up, you've been there. Is there anything that you would suggest doing to organize your activities with the newsroom itself to ensure that you're able to quickly get information back for breaking news and how you go about organizing the process?
So I would suggest that you use not the like messengers like WhatsApp, Telegram, but the good old SMS because it will come to you more quickly than a message in Messenger app because of the internet connection all over the place could be like shut down or just be bad. So while I was covering the protest, I wasn't tweeting. I was just sending SMS messages to my newsroom fixer about what's going on. And you would also want to ask this person in your newsroom to send you a message if something happening and you don't see it, because it is possible, right? If something important is happening, like some important person being taken by the police or something else, you could not, you may not see it, right? Because you are in the middle of the thing. So it's really good to have a team of 3, I would say, like the fixer on the ground, the journalists who like shooting or taking pictures, and somebody in your newsroom.
Great. So do you have any other general advice that you'd like to share with us as well before we go to any questions from the members?
Well, I think I would start with just being psychologically prepared, because at the end of the day, it's really important that you have separated your like journalism perspective and your personal perspective. And I mean, like editorial should always be sure in the person they are sending to cover the protest, because in many like poor newsrooms, they could send an intern, a very young person, to a protest, and it could end badly. But in the case of freelancers, I believe that if you're doing freelance and covering protests, you need to be sure that you have another person to take care of you and like maybe to take care of each other. And I think it's the most important thing actually to be together in this.
Wonderful. It's really beneficial. Thanks, Anya. Does anyone else have any additional questions they'd like to ask? Let's see what we had written so far. Urte asked about the gathering, but I think you already got back to her on that. So anyone else have any questions they'd like to know about covering protests specifically in Eastern Europe? Or we can comment about what Juan said about Latin America and Colombia in case you missed that part.
Justin, would you like to talk a bit about the payment process, and do you push about for a higher pay? Because I think it's important.
Yeah, absolutely.
It wasn't in my experience, but yeah.
So that's also a good question. Is when, especially as freelance, so like if you're working full time, you don't really have this ability to ask for additional payment or anything. But working freelance, if you're going to be covering specifically protests and dangerous activities, it's important to consider why aren't you being paid additional for the risk you're taking, but also to consider the aspect that if you do get hurt, do you have insurance? Do you have medical? If you get, like Juan was saying, if someone's pulling you by the lanyard and you're getting choked, if you end up getting hit by a rubber bullet, it doesn't kill you, but it may hurt you, your eyes get tear gas in them, or you break an arm during the push and shove as everything goes on, and you may trip and fall and someone runs over you within the process. And so there's a lot of aspects that come into this which could cause you, especially as a freelancer, a lot of inability to make money in the future, either because you are resting and helping yourself heal, or you ended up breaking an arm that was used to hold the camera. And so it's important to think about these things in advance before you agree to working on a project with a client, but also you can use it to push the client to provide you more services, such as asking them if they provide insurance, especially accidental medical, for covering that, and if not, if they'll provide you money for you to get insurance. You're going to be in a more violent, dangerous place, then talk to them and say, hey, it's going to have a higher fee. Increase your fee by 50% or something, and explain to them why it is. So as Anya said, a lot of publications will send out their interns. They're going to get those types of results, but even worse, they could hurt their intern. And therefore, they need to understand that it's important to have an experienced professional there, so that way they can be less concerned about someone being arrested or someone being hurt when rubber bullets start flying. But then also you're paid for your experience and your expertise. But it's important for you to express that to the client so they understand that. So I mean, just last session we had on COVID, we talked about how during the COVID crisis, you can also use this as a way to bargain for higher rates as well. If you go somewhere where you have a high risk of getting sick, you should be paid more, as well as you need to consider if you're going to be in quarantine for 2 weeks after reporting, then you're not going to be able to work, in which case they need to pay you for that time you're unable to work while you're covering their story. And that should be something that you're compensated for as well. Obviously, they'll only do it if they really want the material. Not everyone has the budget to pay for your quarantine time. However, if it's important for them and they care about getting it and keeping you safe, and they should do that. One thing also, what HackPack has recently launched just last month is we provide insurance, accidental insurance as well as accidental death insurance. So that way, if you do get hired through HackPack on a project, even if your publication is not going to give you health insurance or accidental health insurance while you're covering the protest, you'll still be covered. You'll be able to get up to $100,000 for medical care that you may potentially need, which actually is important if you end up getting shot with a rubber bullet in the eye or somewhere in the face, which can cause a lot of long-term damage and affect you overall with your job. So these are important things to think about and negotiate with the client while you're going, and make sure that they respect you and your professionalism. Yeah.
I would add also, like from my perspective in Russia, that even for covering protests as a journalist, you may be fined. So you can be taken by police, and they on the trial they would they may not recognize your documents, like for whatever reason it is. And I would also suggest that you negotiate this with your company. So like put the line in your contract in case it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not a big amount of money, but still, like, you are doing your job, and it's not your fault that that's something wrong in the country.
Absolutely. And I think that's actually something that's very relevant to almost every country where you could potentially get fined. But especially in Eastern Europe, I've seen that where there's more bureaucratic infrastructure in order to limit and prevent coverage as well as to prevent protests. And so they can go ahead and use those, such as fines, to prevent people from being protesting, but as well as to prevent journalists from covering it. And so it's very important, as Anya said, to bring this up early on in negotiations and request that it's just generally covered. It doesn't mean they're going to pay anything, and hopefully they don't have to, but it protects and covers you and defines clearly their responsibility when something happens. And that's really what's important, is define their responsibility as the client. One other question about responsibility for you, Anya, is what about your responsibility to protesters? So, like you were mentioning before, like now there's a lot of single protesters and they can only have a single picket. Is there any responsibility for the journalists or any aspects to keep the protesters safe from any violence from the police?
Yeah, sure. So the only allowed protest now is the single picket. Yeah, and
And to clarify, protests are allowed. Only protests without prior permission are single protests. Yes. But it's extremely hard to get permission. So in de facto, the only permitted ones are.
Yeah, it's the thing about Eastern Europe bureaucracy, right? Yeah. How it's happening? Somebody tweeting that somebody else is staying with a poster in a picket near, for example, Duma, like the state building. And this tweet is starting the chain reaction, and many people, many journalists coming to shoot to make pictures with this one person. And when the 10 journalists coming and shooting one person, it's 11 persons, right? And it could be recognized by the authorities as a manifestation, like
protest,
demonstration, right? Mm-hmm. A protest. And this is bad. I mean, like, we shouldn't do it because it could hurt this person who is staying in camp, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're totally right. This is our responsibility to, of course, to provide information about this, but also to be sure that you're, for example, shooting it from a distance. So like the digital cameras now are very good, and you don't need to like come very close to this person. You can shoot from another side of the street.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, that's really all the time I think we have. It's been really interesting, and I appreciate a lot your participating and sharing your lessons you've learned with everyone. Is there anything else you want to say or mention, Anya?
I would say be safe and good luck with covering protests. I hope for everybody who is watching this video that you will be safe and good.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for joining us and participating. We look forward to the next one we have in 2 weeks, which will be around how to find clients and how to approach new clients. So